Some myths begin with light. Kaguya's begins with fruit, the fruit of a world tree whose juice promised transcendence. In the beginning, she is luminous, a goddess, the mother of chakra, a figure so large that entire cosmologies orbit around her name. And then, something quietly fatal happens. The taste of power does not satisfy. It expands the appetite. That single bite becomes a hunger, and hunger becomes a law. Desire can create life, but unchecked, it devours everything. Kaguya Ōtsutsuki is not just Naruto's final enemy. She is mythology's ancient warning that craving does not end in fulfillment, it ends in ruin. Once she tasted what the god tree offered, she could not release it. She did not become a benevolent deity. She became a hoarder of light, an empress who turned abundance into a prison. The consequences are not tidy. Her hunger fractures families, breaks worlds, and rewrites what it means to be a mother. Lands remember her rule as a winter of souls, a season where giving was a way to possess, and possession was all that remained. Today, we will trace that fall. The moment a mother turns into a warder, the instant a gift turns into a lock. We will read Kaguya through Buddhism's diagnosis of craving and through Nietzsche's uneasy account of appetite. This is what happens when desire refuses to stop, when it becomes death. Kaguya's origin is deceptively human. She once stood under a tree, just like any pilgrim might stand beneath a fruiting bough. The difference is that the fruit she plucked held a power beyond mortal measure, chakra itself. Where others might have used that force to heal, to teach, to foster life, Kaguya's first act was to possess it, to fold it inward until the world became an appendage of her will. On paper, she is called the Mother of Chakra. That title sounds maternal, a source, a giver. But the story that follows inverts that frame. Rather than distribute the gift, she appropriates it. Rather than teach her children how to wield power, she keeps it as a treasure to be guarded. In that keeping, motherhood curdles into dominance. Her sons, Hagaramo and Tamara, are born into abundance and then shut out of it. Kaguya's love is not the kind that nourishes autonomy. It is the kind that smothers it. She does not foster agency so much as she tries to absorb it. The myth reads like a single, relentless refusal to let anything that she has taken become independent of her. This shift matters because it turns possession into identity. Kaguya believes that owning the fruit protects her from loss, but hoarding breeds isolation. The act of holding power as an absolute creates a fortress, one that looks like safety, but functions as a tomb, where parental care usually multiplies life. Her guardianship contracts it. The woman who should have been a wellspring becomes a customs house, measuring and taxing each human impulse that approaches. Her initial intention, to preserve, curdled into the imperative to never release. In that imperative, the seeds of her undoing took root. If we want to name the sickness at the heart of Kaguya's story, Buddhism gives us the word tanha, craving. In the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha diagnoses life's basic problem as dukkha, a structural unsatisfaction, and traces its root to tanha, the thirst that never slakes. You reach, you grasp, you swallow, and the very act of swallowing increases the need to swallow again. Desire is not a ladder to be climbed and then left behind. It is a hunger that regenerates itself. Kaguya is a mythic personification of that principle. When she bites into the god tree's fruit, she does not gain peace. She gains momentum. The chakra she consumes amplifies everything about her: life, awareness, potency, and also desire. Her immortality is not a refuge from wanting. It is a crucible in which wanting hardens into law. The more she has, the more she must have. Satisfaction becomes a horizon that retreats as she approaches it. This explains the cruelty masked as care. Kaguya does not control people because she hates them. She controls them because their autonomy threatens the structure that nourishes her appetite. If a child can decide for themselves, the mother's monopoly is at risk. If a village can draw from its own wells, the source that made her sovereign is diminished. So her love becomes management. Her benevolence becomes a form of surveillance. The more she arranges life, the more she must keep arranging it, because tanha is a self-energizing loop. Psychologically, we can read this as the difference between attachment and compassion. Attachment seeks to bind and secure. Compassion seeks to free. Attachment is about keeping. Compassion is about letting be. Kaguya's love is attachment in its most extreme form. To preserve the object of love, she dissolves its subject to. To prevent hurt, she prevents growth. The paradox is that in trying to stop loss, she manufactures it. Nietzsche would have his own reading. He saw appetite as an irreducible force of life, not merely a deficiency, but a form of affirmation. Yet, he also warned that appetites which turn inward and negate vitality become sterile. An appetite that consumes others rather than creating values becomes cannibalistic. Kaguya's will to possess chakra and being ultimately negates the generative power she once held. Her appetite is no longer creative. It is cannibalistic. There is a further irony at the center of her immortality. Craving promises continuity, the dream that by accumulating we will secure ourselves. But accumulation is a brittle form of immortality. You may survive, but you become incapable of the reciprocal acts that make life meaningful. Giving, letting go, reciprocating trust. Kaguya's endless days of taking never yield the quiet fulfillment of giving. That is the cruel logic of tanha as empire. The soul becomes a storeroom and, in time, a mausoleum. When we turn from Kaguya's role as goddess to her role as mother, the story grows even darker. For most myths, motherhood is a symbol of giving. The breast that nourishes, the hand that guides, the heart that releases the child into the world. But Kaguya's version of love looks nothing like release. Her sons, Hagoromo and Hamura, were not cherished as independent beings. They were extensions of her, satellites meant to circle her light. At first glance, this might resemble devotion, a mother unwilling to lose her children. But beneath it lies the same structure of appetite that guided her first act of theft. She doesn't simply love them, she tries to absorb them. The closer they grow to maturity, the more dangerous they become to her dominion, and so her love takes the shape of suffocation. She smothers, not because she wants their flourishing, but because she cannot risk their autonomy. Buddhism names this dynamic attachment, the binding form of desire that seeks to hold, grasp, cling, quink, and attachment, unlike compassion, is destructive. Where compassion allows another to be free, attachment tries to prevent their freedom at all costs. Kaguya's affection for her children is attachment in its most poisonous form. To preserve her grip on them, she tries to devour them. Psychologically, this is a terrifying inversion of intimacy. Love is meant to open a space between two beings where both can flourish. Kaguya collapses that space. She wants no distance, no separation, no independence. Love swallows instead of embraces. KC would recognize this as power disguised as affection. K writes that appetites often dress themselves in noble clothing, devotion, morality, even tenderness. But strip away the costume and you find the same underlying will, the will to consume, to subsume, to dominate. Kaguya's maternal love is nothing less than appetite in a mask. What looks like devotion is, in truth, hunger. Hunger for possession, hunger for permanence. Hunger to erase the terrifying possibility that something she loves might exist without her. Carl Jung gave us the language for this pattern, the devouring mother. She is the inversion of nurturing femininity, not the giver of life, but the one who clutches so tightly that life cannot breathe. In myth and symbol, she appears again and again. Kali, with her necklace of skulls, demanding blood as tribute. Medea, who slays her own children to annihilate the autonomy of her faithless lover. The Greek Demeter, transformed into a punishing figure when her daughter Persephone is taken from her. Each is a reminder that the archetype of motherhood is double-edged. It can nourish, but it can also suffocate. Kaguya belongs firmly in this lineage. She is the goddess of chakra, the supposed mother of a new order, but she embodies the shadow of that role. She does not give life, she consumes it. She does not multiply her children's power, she monopolizes it. Her motherhood is less about creation than about annexation. She is not the mother who nurtures a lineage, but the goddess of craving, endlessly folding the world into herself. This is why her story feels like a myth older than Naruto itself. It echoes humanity's oldest warnings, that unchecked desire, especially maternal desire that refuses to let go, becomes catastrophic. When love refuses separation, it curdles into possession. When giving is replaced by hoarding, creation becomes consumption. The comparison with Esdeath sharpens this point. Esdeath, in her obsession with Tatsumi, seeks control. She wants to master love as one masters an enemy on the battlefield. But Kaguya goes further. She does not merely control, she consumes. Esdeath plays a game of power with her beloved. Kaguya erases the distinction between herself and the beloved entirely. Control ends with subjugation. Consumption ends with annihilation. That is why Kaguya, more than Esdeath, embodies the archetype of the devouring mother. So what happens when desire no longer stops? When it refuses every limit, every boundary, every moment of satisfaction? The answer is simple, but devastating. Desire becomes death. Kaguya's hunger does not only devour others, it erases what makes them living beings. Individuality disappears under her grasp. Freedom dissolves into obedience. Even love itself, that fragile but vital exchange, becomes a tool for domination. To be loved by Kaguya is to be possessed, and to be possessed is to be destroyed as a self. Nietzsche foresaw this trajectory. For him, the will to power was life's essence, but when that will turns only inward, when it feeds on itself, it becomes sterile. A will that does nothing but consume eventually consumes its own vitality. This is Kaguya's fate. Her endless appetite does not enrich her world. It hollows it out. It becomes an empress of ashes, a sovereign of silence. Buddhism expresses the same truth in different terms. Tanha, craving, is not just the root of suffering. It is the reason beings remain trapped in samsara, the endless wheel of rebirth and conflict. Because Kaguya cannot let go, she condemns herself to an eternity of hunger. She achieves immortality, yes, but it is the immortality of an addict. She is endless, not because she is full, but because she is empty. Here lies the ultimate irony of her story. In pursuing desire without limit, she annihilates the very conditions of joy. In trying to secure life forever, she becomes death's avatar, for immortality is not the blessing of a goddess, but the punishment of a soul who cannot release her grip. In Kaguya, myth crystallizes a human truth. When we turn desire into an absolute, we don't transcend mortality. We reproduce it endlessly, stripped of meaning. We become ghosts, feeding on what we cannot keep, shadows whose hunger ensures their own destruction. In the end, Kaguya isn't defeated because she's weak. She's defeated because her hunger has no end. You can't negotiate with craving. You can't reason with a hunger that wants to consume everything. Her sons, Hagramo and Hamura, recognize this truth. They love their mother, but that love cannot survive her obsession. Teeth, to protect the world, they do the unthinkable. They seal away the very woman who gave them life. And this is the tragic irony of Kaguya's story. Her desire began as a way to create peace, to secure life, to end war. But unchecked, that same desire warped into obsession, started as a path to harmony, became a prison of craving. She achieves immortality, yes, but not the kind that breathes joy or freedom. Instead, she becomes timeless hunger itself, strapped in the shell of her own need, a goddess who can never be satisfied. Kaguya became the goddess of chakra, but in truth, she became a ghost of her own hunger. Desire gave her power, but it also became her death. Kaguya Ōtsutsuki isn't just a villain. She's the embodiment of craving, the devouring mother, the mythic warning written into human history. Buddhism tells us craving is the root of suffering. Nietzsche warns that appetite, unchecked, eats away at the soul. Kaguya shows us both. Her story is more than a battle in Naruto. It's a cosmic parable about the hunger that can never end. And that's the final lesson. Kaguya teaches us that craving doesn't end when you get what you want. It grows. And when desire refuses to end, it doesn't give you life, it takes it.